My name is Conrad, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Expeditions and Destination Management for Silversea Cruises. In this series of book reviews, I reflect back on some of the more interesting and spellbinding books of exploration that I have read. Books that has left a footprint in my memory, books that helped cultivate a desire to explore our beautiful world. I remember that it was during one of our expeditions, just under 6 years ago to Kamchatka, that I was reading this captivating book about explorer Bering and naturalist Wilhelm Steller. In fact, while visiting Nikolskoye village on Bering Island, I found out that I was going to be a dad. I remember buying this pair of sealskin boots that day in anticipation of our baby wearing these during the, of course, very harsh South African winters. Although my son Luke might not have found the best use for these sealskin boots in South Africa, kids around the Alaskan Arctic find this type of clothing very useful, in fact, critically necessary for the harsh winters. Alaska is, in fact, a corruption of an Aleut word meaning the shore where the sea breaks its back. First published in 1966, Where the Sea Breaks Its Back, the epic story of George Steller and the Russian exploration of Alaska, it was hailed as one of the greatest adventure books. This is the story of George Wilhelm Steller, a doctor and naturalist who came and saw and described the Steller's jay and Steller sea cow, amongst other animals and plants, on a trip to Alaska. This expedition in 1741 was planned for about 10 years before it happened, and Steller barely was able to join it. The two ships, the St. Peter and St. Paul, were separated merely 2 weeks after sailing from Kamchatka. The ship, the St. Peter, went on to find the Alexander Archipelago in Alaska, and the ship Steller was on, the St. Paul, went further north to sight Mount St. Elias and the rugged coast of Alaska. Both ships wandered back eventually east along the peninsula that becomes the Aleutian Islands. Amazingly, the voyage from Russia was 10 years in preparation, and Steller had a mere 10 hours on Kayak Island in the Gulf of Alaska. It is interesting that this exploration has gone down in history as successful, since I have rarely read about a voyage with so much poor judgment, bad decisions, and mishandling of many situations. Bering basically gave up his role as head of the expedition early on, but his name is synonymous with this area, Bering Sea, Bering Island. But the real heart of this book is describing Steller's keen observations of nature. When the ship wrecked, it is Steller who nurses the crew back to health, particularly because of his understanding of how to treat scurvy with medicinal plants. Steller emerges as a vastly more moving figure than Bering. Although Steller tried to treat the crew's growing scurvy epidemic with leaves and berries that he had gathered, officers scorned his proposal. In fact, Steller and his assistant were some of the few that did not suffer from this ailment. In September, the log recorded another victim. By the will of God, died of scurvy the grenadier Andrei Tretyakov. A third of the crew was down by now, confined to the reeking hold, and the teeth of the other sailors were loosening. As the supply of fresh spoonwort gave out, Bering had a relapse and again lay helpless in his bunk, unable to move hands or feet. Even Waxel was showing the first signs of the plague, brought on by constant worry and the strain of sleepless nights. I do not know whether there is anything more dreary or unpleasant in this world than thus having to navigate in an unknown sea, he recalled. I can truthfully say I did not get many hours peaceful sleep during the 5 months. I was in a continual state of uneasiness, always in danger and uncertainty. Eventually, only 12 members of the crew was able to move, and with the failing rigging, the expedition was shipwrecked on what later became Bering Island. Almost half of the crew had perished from scurvy during the voyage. Steller nursed the survivors, including Bering, but the aging captain could not be saved and died. The remaining men made camp with little food and water, and a situation made worse by the frequent raids of the Arctic foxes. They hunted for sea otters, sea lions, fur seals, sea cows in order to survive. Meanwhile, Steller kept on writing, and he was a magnificent writer. Steller's descriptions of Eskimos or Inuits and flora and fauna are piercingly accurate and empathetic. His dissection of an 8,000-pound sea cow, organ by organ, proceeds with dedication and with fascination. None of Steller's specimens, unfortunately, survived the voyage, but his notebooks did. And that is how we have learned about the huge colonies of otters, foxes, and fur seals. After the ship brought back the stories of how plentiful the otters were, there was a huge rush to plunder these riches, and they almost wiped out the otters. Just like these little boots that I purchased from an Inuit reminds me of the Aleutian Islands almost 6 years ago and serves as my memory of becoming a father. This book continues to remind and enlighten about the amazing and yet tragic expedition and George Steller's significant discoveries as an early naturalist. If you like stories of exploration and survival on the high sea with a lot of natural history thrown in, this book is for you. Where the Sea Breaks Its Back by Corey Ford, an absolutely fantastic read and a wonderful preparation for any expedition to the Russian Far East.